All right, everyone, please gather around. Today we are going to talk about America's favorite pastime. No, it is not baseball. I am referring to its longest-running and most problematic franchise. It is similar to a Pokémon series, but instead of adorable pocket monsters, it features racist laws. The goal is not to catch them all, it is to survive them all. This is not Pikachu, my friends. This is Jim Crow Chew. Every time Black Americans believe they have defeated the Elite Four and become the champion of the league, a new, stronger version of the law appears. It is as if the game developers in Washington, D.C. keep releasing expansion packs of oppression. They simply give it a new name, change its appearance, and send it back out into the world to disrupt our lives. It is the ultimate transformation of something terrible. The United States has a playbook, and this playbook is older than your grandmother's secret recipe for potato salad. It is a masterclass in ensuring that Black people remain in their so-called place. The rules of the game just keep changing. It began with chains. Then it turned into contracts that people could not read. After that, it became signs on water fountains. Then it became invisible lines drawn on a map. Now it is algorithms and computer code. It is the same monster. It has simply evolved from a terrifying Godzilla to a sleek, quiet T-Rex from Jurassic Park. You do not see it coming until it has already caught you in its jaws. We are going to break down this entire evolution, from the dusty old scrolls to the shiny new apps. This history is dark, truly dark. It is so dark that you might need a flashlight and a friend. However, we are going to laugh, because sometimes you have to laugh to keep from crying. Honestly, the ways these laws have been reinvented are so absurd that it is almost funny. It is like watching a bad magician perform the same trick repeatedly, but with a different sparkly hat each time. You know the trick, you see the strings, but he keeps pretending it is brand new magic. So please buckle up. We are about to embark on a historical journey that is part tragedy, part comedy, and entirely American. It is going to be a bumpy, hilarious, and infuriating ride. Let us begin. We are going to examine each evolution of this racist Pokémon. We will start with the original, the slave codes. Next, we will see how it evolved into the black codes. After that, it transformed into Jim Crow, its most infamous form. Then it received a quiet, suburban makeover with redlining. Finally, it reached its current form, mass incarceration, which is the one we are fighting today. This is a whole family tree of foolishness. In the end, you will see that these things never truly disappear. They simply receive a software update and a better publicist. It is time to expose the entire messy, hilarious, and tragic family reunion. Let us begin. Let's start at the beginning. The very, very messy beginning. Before America was even America, when it was just a bunch of colonies with bad attitudes and funny hats, they cooked up something called slave codes. These weren't just rules, honey. This was the source code for all the crazy that came later. The whole point of slave codes was simple. Make it crystal clear that Black people were property, not people, property. Like a chair or a horse, or that one ugly lamp your aunt gave you for Christmas. The laws literally said you couldn't own anything, because you the thing to be owned. It's like your toaster trying to buy a car. The system would just laugh. These codes were wild, y'all. They spelled out everything a Black person couldn't do. You couldn't learn to read or write? Why? Because if you can read, you might read a pamphlet about freedom. Or worse, you might read the Bible and get some ideas about everybody being children of God. Can't have that. You couldn't gather in groups of more than 3 or 4, because if you get together, you might be planning a party or an escape. The paranoia was real. They were so scared of Black people just talking to each other. It was the original this meeting could have been an email, but for oppression, and the tactics were brutal. If you broke a rule, the punishment was swift and awful. We're talking whippings, brandings, and worse. There was no trial, no jury, no let me speak to your manager. The slave owner was the judge, jury, and executioner. And here's the kicker. These codes also made it legal for any white person, any of them, to stop and demand to see your freedom papers if you looked like you were traveling alone. It was the first ever version of stop and frisk, but with more bonnets and fewer body cams. The whole system was designed to keep Black folks locked down, terrified, and powerless from sunup to sundown. The impact of this was, well, slavery. It created a system where generations of Black people were born into bondage. It stripped away our humanity, our culture, our families, and our freedom. It built the entire economy of the South on the backs of free labor. Think about that. They got rich off of us, while making it illegal for us to even learn the alphabet. It was the ultimate scam. The slave codes were the foundation, the concrete slab on which the whole rickety house of American racism was built. They established the idea that blackness itself was a crime that needed to be managed and controlled. And that idea, honey, would prove to have some serious staying power. So, the Civil War happens. Boom! The North wins. Lincoln signs the Emancipation Proclamation. Slavery is over. Everybody throws a party, right? Wrong. Hold up. Wait a minute. For about 5 hot seconds, black folks were celebrating. We were finally free. We could vote, own land, find our families. It was looking up. But then, the South was like, oh, you think you're free? That's cute. As soon as the war was over, Southern states looked at the 13th Amendment, which abolished slavery as a punishment for a crime, and a sneaky little light bulb went on over their heads. They got to work creating the sequel, the Black Codes. These Black Codes were basically the slave codes in a cheap tuxedo. They were a set of laws passed in 1865 and 1866 with one goal to get black people back on the plantation. But this time, make it legal. They couldn't call it slavery anymore, so they got creative. The codes had all these new rules that only applied to black people. For example, you had to sign a labor contract with a white farmer every single year. If you didn't have one by January, you could be arrested for vagrancy. And guess what the punishment for vagrancy was? You got leased out to a white farmer to work for free. Sound familiar? It was slavery with an extra step. The tactics were so slick and so evil. They made laws against insulting gestures or malicious mischief. What does that even mean? It means whatever a white person wanted it to mean. If you didn't smile right, that was an insulting gesture. Arrested. If you looked at someone the wrong way, malicious mischief. Arrested. They also had laws that said black people couldn't own guns, couldn't serve on a jury, and in some places couldn't even rent or own property in town. They were trying to force everyone back into the same rural, agricultural labor they were supposedly freed from. It was a bait-and-switch of historical proportions. The impact was devastating. It was like being promised a feast and then getting served a plate of dirt. The Black Codes basically re-established a system of near slavery. They created a permanent underclass of black laborers who had no rights and no way to get ahead. That little loophole in the 13th Amendment, they drove a truck right through it. The codes made it so easy to turn any black person into a criminal. And once you were a criminal, you lost your freedom all over again. This was the moment America showed its whole behind. It proved that ending slavery was one thing, but accepting black freedom? That was a whole different story. The Black Codes were a declaration that freedom wasn't going to be free after all. Okay, so the federal government stepped in for a minute during Reconstruction and shut down the Black Codes. They were like, hey South, you're doing too much. But that didn't last long. Once the Northern troops packed up and went home, the South went right back to its old tricks. This time, they came up with a new system that was even more powerful and long-lasting. Meet the new boss, meaner than the old boss, Jim Crow. This wasn't just a set of laws, it was a whole way of life. It was the Black Codes on steroids with a marketing budget and a theme song. Jim Crow laws were all about one thing, segregation, separate but equal. That was the slogan. But we all know it was separate and totally unequal. There were white and colored signs on everything. Water fountains, bathrooms, waiting rooms, schools, restaurants, even cemeteries. You couldn't even be buried next to a white person. They were so committed to the bit, they wanted to keep us separated even in death. It was a system designed to remind black people every single second of every single day that they were considered inferior. It was psychological warfare disguised as public policy. You couldn't escape it. It was in the air you breathed. And while Jim Crow was handling the social stuff, its evil twin, convict leasing, was handling the economic side. Remember that little loophole about slavery being okay as a punishment for a crime? Well, they perfected it. States would arrest black men for the dumbest things, loitering, not having a job, talking too loud, and then lease them out to private companies. Coal mines, lumber camps, farms. These companies would work men to death, literally. The conditions were often worse than slavery because under slavery, the owner had a financial interest in keeping their property alive. Under convict leasing, if a prisoner died, the state just sent another one. It was a disposable workforce. The impact of this 1-2 punch was catastrophic. Jim Crow locked black communities out of society, and convict leasing locked them up and sold them for parts. It created a cycle of poverty and imprisonment that was almost impossible to break. It stole generations of black men from their families and communities. It financed the industrialization of the New South with black bodies. This wasn't just a reboot of slavery, it was a system so total and so brutal that it defined life for black Americans for almost a century. It was the masterpiece of American legal racism, a truly dark and twisted work of art. Now, you might be asking yourself, Tiffany, how was all this legal? Didn't the Constitution say something about equal protection? Oh, you sweet summer child. Let me introduce you to our sponsor for this whole era of madness, the Supreme Court. In 1896, they heard a case called Plessy v. Ferguson. A man named Homer Plessy, who was 7/8 white, bought a ticket for the whites-only car of a train in Louisiana to challenge the state's segregation laws. He was arrested, and the case went all the way to the top. This was the moment. The Supreme Court had a chance to shut down Jim Crow before it really got going. So what did our esteemed justices do? They looked at the case, stroked their beards, and basically said, yeah, this seems fine. They came up with the legal doctrine of separate but equal. They argued that as long as the separate facilities for black and white people were equal, then it didn't violate the 14th Amendment's promise of equal protection under the law. It was one of the most creatively dumb decisions in legal history. It was like saying you can punch someone in the face as long as you provide them with an equal ice pack afterward. The logic was just not there. The court completely ignored the reality on the ground. They knew, we knew, everybody knew that the colored facilities were never, ever equal. The colored schools got old, torn-up textbooks. The colored waiting rooms were just a dirty corner of the station. The colored water fountain was a rusty tap next to the toilet. The whole point of separation was to enforce inequality, to brand black people as unclean and unworthy. The equal part was a joke. It was a legal fiction, a lie the country told itself so it could keep being racist without feeling too bad about it. The impact of Plessy v. Ferguson was like pouring gasoline on a fire. It gave Jim Crow the green light. It was the official stamp of approval from the highest court in the land. It told every state in the South, go ahead, do your worst. And they did. After this decision, Jim Crow laws exploded across the country. It locked segregation into place for more than 50 years. It was the legal foundation for all the pain and humiliation of that era. So next time you hear someone talking about the majesty of the law, remember Plessy? The law isn't always right. Sometimes it's the biggest bully on the playground. All right, so the civil rights movement happens. Dr. King has a dream, people march, and the big, loud whites-only signs start coming down. The Civil Rights Act of 1964 and the Voting Rights Act of 1965 officially killed Jim Crow. Hooray! We won, right? We finally beat the final boss. Well, hold on. This racist Pokémon didn't die, it just evolved again. It put away its white hood and put on a business suit. It moved out of the South and into the suburbs. Meet the next phase, redlining and urban renewal. This was Jim Crow with a mortgage application and a bulldozer. Redlining was a quiet, sneaky kind of evil. The federal government literally drew maps of cities all across America. They colored neighborhoods in green, blue, yellow, and red. Green neighborhoods were the best. Guess who lived there? White people. Red neighborhoods were hazardous. Guess who lived there? Black people. If you lived in a redlined neighborhood, you could not get a government-backed mortgage. You couldn't get a loan to buy a house or start a business. The government basically told the banks, don't invest here. It was a way to keep black people trapped in poor, under-resourced neighborhoods and out of the new, booming suburbs. This is how the suburbs were born, y'all. The government was handing out cheap loans like candy to white families to go buy a cute little house with a picket fence. That's how their parents and grandparents built wealth. Home ownership is the #1 way to build generational wealth in America. But for black folks, the door was slammed shut. We were systematically cut off from that American dream. While white America was building equity, black America was having its equity stolen. It created the massive wealth gap that we still see today. It wasn't because we didn't work hard enough. It was because the game was rigged from the start. Then came urban renewal, which a lot of black folks called Negro removal. The government would declare a thriving black neighborhood a slum or blighted. Then they'd come in with bulldozers, tear everything down to build a new highway, a stadium, or luxury apartments. They destroyed thousands of black homes, businesses, and communities. They displaced families that had lived in these neighborhoods for generations, scattering them to the wind. It was a way to break up black political power and seize valuable land. They called it progress, but it was just another land grab, another way to control where we could and couldn't live. It was Jim Crow with a construction permit. So, by the 70s and 80s, the old-school racism wasn't playing so well on TV. You couldn't be openly racist anymore. You had to be slick about it. So, the racist Pokémon evolved one more time. It put on a police uniform, got a badge and a gun, and declared a war on drugs. Now let me be clear. Were there drugs in the community? Yes. But this wasn't a war on drugs. It was a war on people. Specifically, black and brown people. It was the new, socially acceptable way to control us. You couldn't say you wanted to lock up black people, but you could say you wanted to be tough on crime. Same message, different package. The tactics were genius in the most evil way. They created huge differences in sentences for crack cocaine, which was more common in black communities, and powder cocaine, which was more common in white communities. You could get the same prison sentence for having 5 grams of crack as you would for having 500 grams of powder cocaine. A 100-to-1 disparity. It was a mathematical formula for putting black people in jail. Then they brought in mandatory minimum sentences and 3 strikes laws. These laws took power away from judges and forced them to hand out crazy long sentences for even minor, non-violent drug offenses. The result? The prison population in America exploded. It went from around 300,000 in the 1970s to over 2 million today. And who filled up those prisons? You guessed it, black and brown folks. This became the new Jim Crow. Once you're labeled a felon, you lose so many of your rights. You can lose your right to vote. You can be denied housing, student loans, and jobs. You're locked into a permanent second-class citizenship, just like under the old Jim Crow. It's a system that's designed to trap you, your children, and your children's children. It's the convict leasing system all over again, but this time it's run by massive, for-profit private prison corporations. This is the big one, y'all. This is the final boss we're fighting right now. Mass incarceration has destroyed families and devastated communities on a scale we've never seen before. It has become a massive industry that makes billions of dollars off of locking up human beings. And it all started with a so-called war that was never really about drugs. It was about finding a new way to do the same old thing, control black bodies and suppress black freedom. It's the most successful and destructive evolution of this racist Pokémon yet. It's a monster that has swallowed millions of lives. You thought we were done? Oh, bless your heart, the monster never sleeps. It just logs on. Today we're facing a new kind of Jim Crow. It's quiet, it's invisible, and it lives inside our computers. I'm talking about algorithms, artificial intelligence, and big data. This is the digital Jim Crow. It's all the old biases of the past, now coded into the technology that runs our lives. It's racism with a tech bro smile and a hoodie, and because it's all done by computers, they can claim it's objective and neutral. But that's the biggest lie of all. Think about it. The data that these algorithms are trained on comes from our biased world. So if you train an algorithm on historical crime data, what do you think it's going to learn? It's going to learn that police have historically over-policed black neighborhoods. So the algorithm tells the police to send more officers to those same neighborhoods. This creates a feedback loop of surveillance and arrests. It's predictive policing, which is just a high-tech version of stop and frisk. The computer is telling the cops where to find crime, but it's really just telling them where to find black people. This digital bias shows up everywhere. It's in the algorithms that decide who gets a job interview. If the AI learns from a company's past hiring data, and that company has a history of not hiring black people, the AI will learn to screen out resumes with black-sounding names or from historically black colleges. It's in the algorithms that decide who gets a loan. If you live in a zip code that was redlined back in the day, the algorithm might see you as a higher risk, even if you have perfect credit. You can be denied a mortgage by a computer program, and you'll never even know why. This is the new frontier of the fight. It's harder to see and harder to protest. You can't hold up a sign against an algorithm. You can't march on a server farm. This new system is slick. It launders discrimination through the language of technology and data. It allows old prejudices to operate with a new, clean, scientific veneer. It's the same old monster, just in a new digital costume. It's got a new name and a worse attitude because this time it can hide behind a screen of ones and zeros. We have to get smart about this, y'all, because the fight for freedom has officially gone online. LOL, you funny. So here we are. We've gone from slave codes to black codes, from Jim Crow to redlining, from the war on drugs to digital discrimination. It's been a wild ride, right? It's like watching the worst reality show ever, where the villain gets voted off but then comes back the next season with a new identity and a new evil plan. So, to answer the big question, did the black codes ever really disappear? You want the short answer? No. Pause. You funny for even asking. They never left. They just got a makeover. They went from Kmart to Walmart. They're still selling the same cheap stuff, just in better packaging. These laws are like a bad weed in America's garden. You can pull it out, but if you don't get the root, it's just gonna grow back stronger and uglier. The root is the idea that Black people need to be controlled. That idea has been the foundation of this country since day one. And every time we chop down one version of it, another one sprouts up in its place. You know who has suffered most of all of this? Black women. They had to do it alone because the system keeps taking and corrupting her king. Black men have been broken, and sis, she is tired of wearing the king's crown. Black men are hunted by a system of adaptation. It learns, it evolves, it finds new ways to survive. It's the Terminator of racism. It just keeps coming back, and each time it has a cooler special effect. But here's the thing. We're the heroes of this story. We're the Sarah Connor who knows the monster is coming. We've fought it in every single one of its forms. We fought it on the plantations, in the courtrooms, on the streets, and at the ballot box. And now we have to fight it in the code. We have to be smarter, faster, and more creative than the system that's trying to hold us down. We have to call it out. We have to learn about it. We have to teach our kids about it. We can't let them think this stuff is ancient history. It's happening right now on your phone. So what do? Support small standalone unrestricted AI platforms. Support private AI development. And we keep laughing because your vibration resonates globally. Don't let this history break you. Let it make you laugh, cry at the absolute audacity of it all. Then, get to work. Talk about this with your friends. Ask the hard questions. And hey, while you're at it, do me a favor. Like this, share this, and drop a comment below. Let me know which racist Pokémon evolution shocked you the most. Hit that subscribe button and ring the bell because we've got a lot more of America's messy history to unpack. And trust me, it only gets crazier from here. She ready, so plug in.